So I've talked about some of the static elements of the pattern that you can always rely on. Now let's talk about actually dodging through things. And I'm going to break it into two parts. The first part is going to be what I deal with in um, the beginning of the wave, and the second bit is how I deal with that last really difficult dodge. So I'm not going to have as much to say about the early part. It's going to come down to two things that you have to get used to. The first of which relies on the static nature of where Orin is firing the rings from. Um, because she is always firing the rings from the exact same spots every time, you can know exactly where to look for clumps and read ahead. So let's take a look at some caps and see what I'm doing in the early sections of the pattern. And you're going to see that I'm mostly macro dodging. I really don't try to micro at all in the early part of the pattern. The reason being that if I have to pay attention to do a tricky micro dodge, then that's going to draw my attention away from the next clump. If I have to do a tricky micro, then that means that I have to pay really close attention to the bullets that are really close to me, and I can't have my eyes move to the next clump that's going to be coming in my way. So again, the early part is know where the clumps are going to come from, read ahead to them, macro through everything. So let's take a peek at some of some of caps here. So again, first clump's going to come to my left, and again, macroing through things. And I'll comment on the very end of the pattern separately later, after I've done a few of these early things. So again, first clump's going to be left, second clump's going to be center. Then it's going to be right center. That's the next one. This. Okay, so again, first clump left, second clump center, third clump right. So again, macro to give yourself as much reading room as possible, because it's, if you just take a very short amount of time to look for the largest gap, and you know that you're comfortably in that large gap, then you can start looking ahead to the next bad clump. Gives you a lot more time to react to future clumps. Whereas if you're paying way too much attention to like tricky micros, you're gonna get screwed. So you can't keep up with the reading. It's very fast reading. You gotta keep your eyes in motion to go to the next clump. After you've done this, after you've practiced it a bunch, your eyes will kind of just know exactly where they need to move to for each successive clump, which is pretty nice. It feels good. Okay, so unfortunately, I don't really have a lot to say about the early section of the pattern. Let's start talking more about the very end, which is the really hard part. So let's go back to these caps that I just showed, and let's start paying attention to what I do at the end. And well, you'll see that I cap it in a few different ways. But let's start taking a bit of info about where I end the pattern and why it makes sense that I ended it there as opposed to other spots. So actually, let's look at a failed attempt first. So I'm pretty sure that I die here. Let's take a peek at why I die and how I screwed it up. The rule of thumb for this final section is don't be in a triple overlap. Okay, so what happened there was me dying because of some pretty bad positioning. So let's take a look. I bottom hugged a little too much, So I would have been fine if I had just moved up. See, if I had done a macro up, I would have been totally fine there. All right, let's take a look at what's coming. So unpause. So for what I was up over here, and what I decided to try to do is move down. I chickened out of trying to make it through this macro. There would have been a nice macro. See, there's three of these things, three of these icicles or needles coming from the left, and then there's this isolated one off to the side here. If I had moved up, I would have been okay, because then I could have just moved up and over like this. But instead, I opted to go down to the left, which, sometimes that can work fine. Going down to the left is nice because I'm essentially trying to macro into this lane. Oops, oh shit. Where was that? That was 39, 1039 attempt. So what I'm trying to do here is put myself in a spot where I can get into this bottom lane. Now, the issue is that that's a little bit unreliable if I'm in the middle, because, well, I have to deal with this vertical clump here, and I have to just and I'm subjecting myself to the whims of RNG because maybe the ring was rotated a little too far down. So it's not so good. I should have moved up. I didn't. Screwed up there. Let's find another good death. So I think another good one is around here. Yeah, so let's take a look here. Pretty sure I died this one. But this one would be nice. So again, macroing through the early stuff. And let's see where I die and what. Oh, I didn't die yet. So that was all still macroed at the end. Okay, so why did I die there? Let's take a look. Pretty sure it's the same reason as the other death too, where I tried to go back down. Yeah, it was literally the same thing. So if I had been wiser, I should have just moved up. If I had moved up there, I would have been totally okay. And that's going to be a big thing about this pattern. I think unfortunately, it's been a while since I've was in like the height of my like LNN grind practicing this thing. I I think that with a lot of this footage, a lot of my caps are going to be on the either the center or a little bit off to the left. I did not do as many caps on the right side as I normally would. So the way that you usually do caps on the right side of catwalk, well, finishing doing the final dodge on the right side, is you're usually going to have to get some vertical upward positioning. So those two deaths that I just showed back to back are examples of an unwillingness to move up and get myself into a nice location where I've macroed through the leftmost ring. So let's talk a little more about what's going on. So again, so it's this leftmost ring that's going to create lanes that are going to kill me. I'm gonna in this footage I'm gonna fail to macro around it, and instead I'm going to chicken out and go back to a near bottom hug scenario, hoping that I can macro on the left, down left, instead of upright. Right? I'm going to try to macro into a lane that I can't actually reach. Whereas I would be fine here if I just macroed up to the right. So let's see what happens here. So see, I go down, and now I'm dead. Let's also go, well, let's see what happens here too. Well, now we're up to the part where the audio is being shit, so let's actually go back a bit. Let's see a few right caps. I think that I have one here. Here's the cap that ends the first wave on the right. And let's see why this ends up working out. This is going to look crazy. This is probably the harder area to get used to. Um, wait, I didn't go back far enough. Okay. Um, no, still not far enough. So in prep for what's going to happen, a large portion of the dodging of this final wave. So let me talk about what I'm actually reading here. I am paying zero attention to what's on the right side of the screen in the last dodge. So, like, this last rightmost ring is a total mystery to me. I don't look at it, like, basically at all when I'm doing the last dodge. Because ideally, where I'm not in an area where I'm going to have to deal with a triple overlap. So, I'm trying, the whole point of the very last dodge is to be in a spot where you're not forced to do some dumb triple overlap. So like if I were all the way at the bottom down here, forced over there, that would get pretty bad. There are some spots again off a little bit to the left here where you can have sort of a center left center ring fiasco that can get pretty gross. Um, and there are also areas a little bit to the right where stuff can get pretty nasty because of triple overlaps. Um, so again, the reason that I don't try to really read the right side is because, well, okay, you don't have much time to do that, right? You've got to know you got to know how to deal with lanes from the bottom left ring, and you got to position yourself in a lane on the bottom middle ring. And you got to do this all before the right ring becomes factors into the equation. So before the right ring really starts moving around a lot. So let's see what I'm doing here. So yeah, so I was able to get around that, again, more or less in the middle before the right ring even started moving. So I didn't have to look at it until everything else had passed by me, and then it was alone. So again, the right ring is something you want to read by itself after you've dodged everything else. I think that there's a good path coming up where I dodge far to the right, and you'll see that okay, so here, I think it's over here. Nope. Where was this cap? There's really stupid. The cap is going to look really stupid, and it's going to look like I totally left out. But there is a reason for why it works out pretty nicely. This one. Yeah. Okay. So okay. So this one looks absolutely stupid. Like, why did that work at all? Well, let's take a look. First of all, let's try to understand what even happened here. So you're going to see that I end up really far to the right, and then I have to move back left again. So why did I move left? Well, let's think about how the rings are going to unfold, right? So my first goal is to put myself in a position to dodge the left and the center ring. And what's the last ring going to do? Well, let's see what happens when it activates. So once the ring activates, it is going to start moving. It's going to start moving down left relative to where it is, right? And like I said, I'm not reading it, right? I'm not reading this rightmost ring. So, but I know, when it's going to activate, because everything activates a very, the same amount of time after the rings have been placed. And I want to get myself through the previous two rings, and also make sure that I'm not like just running myself into this ring that I have no idea what the bullets are yet. Right? I'm trying to dodge the previous two rings and dodge the very last rightmost ring independently of everything else. The rightmost ring should be read completely independently after it's been isolated and everything else has been dodged. And to do that, there are going to be scenarios where I'm going to find myself close to that rightmost ring. And when I'm in situations like that, and I haven't had enough time to read the rightmost ring, I know that I'm going to have to start moving left again, because if I move left, when I'm very close to that rightmost ring, I'm at least delaying the amount of time that I'm at least delaying the time when that rightmost ring can get to me. Right. So let's see what's going on here. Right. I move left so that way because I know that I'm gonna have to. I'm basically retreating from this ring. I'm retreating from that rightmost ring so that way it doesn't really. That way I give myself more time to actually end up looking at it. Right. I don't know what the ring looks like. I'm just retreating from it. And that's just going to blanket, like, keep me safe from it until I've had enough time to actually parse what's going on with it. And again, there are going to be some shitty spots where I'm always going to die because I'm not. I've ended the early dodging in a bad spot where there's going to be a triple overlap. So let's see if I can find some areas where some bad overlaps occur, and sort of give you rules of thumb of where to not be. Let's see. So macroing through all this stuff, macroing, and oh, well, that was very close to death there. Too many overlaps at once, I would say. I don't. So a lot of time when I have to do really tricky micros, I'm not very pleased with myself. Uh, Even the ending should ideally have a bunch of macros in it. Again, see, this rightmost ring is dodged totally independently. Everything else has gone off screen by the time I dodge it. Let's see if I can find another dodge where I go on the right side. Okay. Oh, that was a triple over. All right, let's go back to that. Let's see why I died there. So again, I've got the too much stuff, right? I had the previous right ring, so the second to last right ring. I had this left ring and this center ring all in the same area at once. And again, this is sort of just a little bit to Orin's left. That's going to be a spot where I have died so many freaking times doing this pattern. Uh, like, of course, there are always going to be exceptions based on how the rings are rotated and stuff, but like, that is since you know exactly where the rings spawn, though, right? We know that the rings spawn at the same exact times in the same exact spots. So if you can imagine where as the rings are going outwards, right? As the rings move outwards, you're always guaranteed to get some amount of triple overlapping around this spot, like around where I died here at the end. There are a few nasty that's just a quirk of the geometry of the pattern based on how the static ring spawns work. So there are going to be some areas where trying to end the pattern, trying to go into that final dodge, you can just screw yourself over just by attempting to do that final dodge in specific spots. Um, Again, other areas that can be pretty bad are like a little bit too low to the right here. This is an infamous one where I've died so many times because again, you can't really do any nice, like if you just get too much overlap basically at once. It's really hard to read from certain spots. Um, I'm not sure if I can. Probably if I had made this video a few months back, like 4 months ago, when I was at my peak of catwalking, I would have a lot more advice on which spots specifically to avoid. But yeah, the point is that there are some like if you go back and watch some replays of where you're dying on this pattern, and you see that a lot of it has to do with some of these nasty like overlaps right away instead of areas where you only have to deal with two rings at once instead of three rings at once. That'll probably help you out a lot with knowing that I'm in a bad spot where I die. I could expect to die much more easily than in other spots. Okay, let's see if I can have some more far right caps though, because I do really like those. They're usually the coolest caps too if you're able to cap on the far right, because usually those require a lot of vertical motion and a little bit of leftward motion to get around the rightmost ring. So I really like them. I think they're the coolest. See, look, there's a bit of nice vertical motion to get out of the lanes. Uh, Such a fun way to dodge the pattern. So I do a little macro up to get around these, yeah, to get through the lanes. Very nice. I really like dodging like that. So again, staying at the bottom, you're not able, like, you don't want to bottom hug this pattern in the last dodge because vertical motion can be essential to getting yourself through the right lanes, the proper lanes. And again, I risked a little too much in that dodge there with the triple overlap. So, yeah. Nope. Should have moved up. Alright, let's see what I do here. Oh, there I mostly moved up and then had to, again, macro through the ending. Nice. Yeah, so, okay. Again, to summarize the last dodge, I literally have no idea what the rightmost ring is doing. Um, and so I just, if when I see it activate, I know that I might have to retreat from it. But really, you should, like, once you practice this pattern a lot, like while you're practicing it, pay attention to how much time you have before that rightmost ring even starts moving. You can do a lot of macroing through the previous two rings before it even starts moving, and knowing how much time you have to do those previous dodges before you have to look at that right ring, that can really help you out with this pattern a lot. So I don't know if this giant rambling was and analysis was of any use at all. Again, maybe it would have been better if I had eye tracker or knew how to overlay some paint and stuff. But hopefully this at least has some tips that can be of use. Again, it's a very much, it's like a really weird mixture of chimp and gorilla in terms of how you read this pattern. Because, of course, there are going to be some sort of bad spots that you typically don't want to be, but you can still survive in the bad spots if you're able to do fast enough reading from those spots. But usually you want to be in areas where you don't have to look at the rightmost ring, and you can just get through the previous clumps uh, independently of that right ring. So, and being in a spot where geometrically speaking you would have multiple ring overlaps for a long period of time is not good. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Yeah,